The first shot came at 0647 hours from a position nobody should have been able to occupy. Staff Sergeant Daniel Cross watched through his binoculars as Captain Rachel Morrison's head snapped back. The 338 Lapua round. Doing what? 338 Lapua rounds, due to human skulls, at 900 meters. She had been standing at the entrance to the forward operating base in eastern Syria, coffee in hand, discussing patrol routes with her team. Now, she was just another casualty in a war that had already claimed too many. But this wasn't enemy action. This was something worse. Daniel had been a Marine Scout sniper for 8 years, conducting operations across 3 continents that most people would never hear about. He understood ballistics, wind drift, and the mathematics of death delivered from distance. What he didn't understand was how someone had made that shot from a position his own reconnaissance had cleared just 6 hours earlier. How they had moved into place without triggering any of the sensor networks. How they had known exactly when Morrison would be standing in that precise location. The second shot came 90 seconds later, taking out Lieutenant Chen as he ran to Morrison's position. Different angle, different shooter. Daniel's trained eye tracked the bullet's trajectory back to a ridgeline 1,100 meters distant. Professional work, extreme range, perfect execution. By the time the third shot killed Sergeant Williams, Daniel understood they were facing something unprecedented. This wasn't a lone sniper. This was a coordinated team operating with intelligence that could only come from inside their own command structure. Over the next 72 hours, the pattern became clear and terrifying. 17 American personnel eliminated across 4 separate forward operating bases in eastern Syria, all of them shot by snipers who seemed to know exactly where their targets would be, exactly when they would be vulnerable, exactly which routes offered no cover and no escape. Daniel's commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Webb, called an emergency briefing on the 4th day. The room was packed with intelligence analysts, security personnel, and the remaining combat leaders who hadn't been eliminated yet. We're not fighting insurgents anymore, Webb announced without preamble. We're being hunted by professionals with access to our operational plans, our personnel schedules, and our defensive layouts. Every indication suggests this is an organized effort, specifically targeting American command elements. He activated a screen showing surveillance footage from 3 different bases. We've identified at least 4 distinct sniper teams operating in the region, all of them American-trained, using American weapons, executing American tactical doctrines. The room erupted in shocked conversation. American snipers killing American soldiers was beyond comprehension. Sir, are you suggesting deserters? Someone asked. Mercenaries? Webb's expression was grim. We're suggesting something worse. Evidence indicates these operators are part of a sanctioned program. Someone within our own command structure has turned our most elite shooters against us. Daniel felt his blood run cold. He knew most of the military's top-tier snipers personally, had trained alongside them, competed with them, respected their skills. The idea that some of them had turned was like discovering cancer in your own family. Sergeant Cross, Webb addressed him directly. Your counter-sniper experience makes you essential to this operation. We need you to find them, identify them, and stop them. Rules of engagement, sir. Webb hesitated. These are American citizens, Cross, but they're killing Americans. You're authorized to use whatever force necessary to protect our personnel. If you're finding this story compelling, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. This is the kind of raw, authentic military storytelling that reveals truths most people never see. Now, back to Daniel's impossible mission. The intelligence packet Daniel received 2 hours later was simultaneously comprehensive and deeply disturbing. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, ballistic analysis, and psychological profiles painted a picture of something that shouldn't exist. A rogue element within American Special Operations conducting systematic elimination of specific personnel. The first identified shooter was Captain James Reeves, former Marine Scout sniper instructor at Quantico. 73 confirmed kills across 2 combat tours, reputation for ice-cold precision and unwavering discipline. He had been reported killed in action 18 months earlier during an operation in Afghanistan. Apparently, that report had been premature or fabricated. The second was Master Sergeant Lisa Chen, no relation to the Lieutenant Chen who had been killed, formerly of the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, champion competitive shooter, specialist in extreme-range engagements, known for making shots other snipers considered impossible, also officially dead, killed in a training accident 3 years prior. The pattern continued through 4 confirmed operators, all supposedly deceased, all among the military's most accomplished snipers. Someone had recruited them, faked their deaths, and deployed them against their former comrades. Daniel studied their operational signatures obsessively. Reeves favored elevated positions with multiple escape routes, always shooting from locations that maximized his advantage, while minimizing counter-sniper opportunities. Chen preferred extreme range, pushing her weapons beyond their rated capabilities through flawless fundamentals and environmental mastery. The psychological profiles were equally revealing. All 4 had expressed concerns during their careers about mission legitimacy, questioned orders they considered morally ambiguous, demonstrated independent thinking that had both made them exceptional operators and marked them as potential problems for rigid command structures. They didn't turn because they're evil, Daniel muttered to himself while reviewing the files. They turned because someone convinced them the system itself was corrupt. His radio crackled. "Cross, get to the operations center. We have movement." Daniel grabbed his gear and sprinted across the compound. The operations center hummed with activity. Analysts hunched over screens displaying real-time drone footage of the surrounding terrain. There, an analyst pointed. 2 individuals, moving into position on Hill 347. Profile matches military training. They're setting up for a shot. Daniel studied the footage. The figures moved with professional efficiency, establishing a hide site that would be virtually invisible from ground level. Range to the base was approximately 1,200 meters. Several high-value targets would be exposed during the evening briefing scheduled in 40 minutes. "How long to get a strike package on that position?" Webb demanded. 20 minutes minimum for airborne assets, the tactical officer replied. "They'll be gone before we can engage." Webb turned to Daniel. "Can you get there in time?" Daniel calculated distances, terrain, probable approach routes, not to intercept before they're shot, but I can be in position to engage immediately after they fire. They'll be focused on their target, vulnerable to counter-sniper fire. You'll be alone out there, no backup, no support. That's how counter-sniper operations work, sir. One shooter against another. Webb studied him for a long moment. "This isn't like hunting insurgents, Cross. These are operators who know every counter-sniper tactic we have. They'll expect pursuit. Then, I'll have to be better than they expect." 20 minutes later, Daniel was moving through the Syrian terrain with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years operating in hostile environments. His primary weapon was an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, accurate to 1,200 meters in the right hands. His hands had proven right many times before. He approached Hill 347 from an unexpected angle, using terrain features to mask his movement. The drone feed continued in his earpiece, providing updates on the sniper team's position and status. "They're acquiring targets," the analyst reported. "Looks like they're preparing to engage." Daniel pushed harder, covering the final 200 meters at a pace that balanced speed with stealth. He reached a position offering line of sight to their hide, approximately 400 meters distant, just as the first shot cracked across the valley. Through his scope, Daniel watched one of the figures work the bolt on their rifle, chambering another round. The second figure was spotting, calling corrections. Professional, practiced, lethal. Daniel acquired the shooter in his crosshairs. At this range, with the target stationary and focused on their own engagement, the shot was routine for someone of his skill level. But his finger hesitated on the trigger. That figure in his scope was an American soldier, someone who had taken the same oath he had, who had served the same flag. Pulling this trigger meant crossing a line he had never imagined confronting. The shooter fired again. Someone else at the base had just died. Daniel's hesitation ended. He controlled his breathing, found his natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with the same discipline that had carried him through dozens of combat engagements. The .300 Winchester Magnum round covered 400 meters in less than half a second. Through his scope, Daniel watched the shooter collapse. The spotter reacted instantly, abandoning position and fleeing through pre-planned escape routes. Daniel didn't pursue. Chasing fleeing snipers got you killed. Instead, he moved to the hide site, securing it for evidence and confirming the kill. The dead shooter was Captain James Reeves, exactly as the intelligence had indicated. His rifle was a customized M40A6, his equipment professional grade, his execution flawless, except for the counter-sniper he hadn't anticipated. Searching the position, Daniel found something that made his blood run cold. A photograph tucked into Reeves's gear. It showed 6 people in military fatigues, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. Daniel recognized them all. They had been his sniper instructor class at Quantico 5 years earlier. 5 of those 6 were now supposedly dead, including Reeves. The 6th was Daniel himself. His radio crackled. "Cross, what's your status?" "One hostile neutralized. Confirmed identity as Captain James Reeves. One additional hostile escaped to the east. Outstanding work. Return to base for debrief." But Daniel remained at the position, staring at that photograph. Why would Reeves carry this particular image into a mission targeting his former comrades? What message was he trying to send? Back at the base, the debrief confirmed what Daniel already suspected. The eliminated sniper team had been targeting specific personnel. Colonel Webb himself had been the intended victim of their final shot before Daniel's intervention. "We need you to continue operations against the remaining hostile elements," Webb informed him during a private meeting afterward. "You've proven you can counter their tactics." "Sir, I need to understand something. Why are they doing this? What convinced American snipers to turn against their own people?" Webb's expression revealed careful consideration of his response. "There are aspects of this situation that remain classified above your clearance level, Sergeant. What I can tell you is that these individuals were recruited into a program that became compromised. They believe they're fighting corruption. We know they're being manipulated. Manipulated by who? That's what we're trying to determine." The answer felt incomplete, calculated to provide minimal information while demanding maximum action. Daniel had learned to recognize when commanders weren't telling the full truth. Drop a comment below about whether you would follow orders in Daniel's situation. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. Now let's see how deep this conspiracy goes. Over the following week, Daniel conducted 3 more counter-sniper operations, each one revealing additional pieces of a disturbing puzzle. The hostile snipers weren't just randomly targeting personnel. They were systematically eliminating specific individuals connected to a classified program designated Archon Initiative. Daniel had never heard of Archon until finding references to it in captured equipment and intercepted communications. Whatever it was, it involved deep military intelligence operations and had roots extending back decades. The 4th operation brought Daniel face to face with Master Sergeant Lisa Chen, the extreme-range specialist. She had positioned herself on a ridgeline 1,400 meters from forward operating base Damascus, preparing to engage a convoy of visiting Pentagon officials. Daniel had anticipated her position through pattern analysis, arriving early enough to establish his own hide, overlooking her location. When she settled into position and began her shooting calculations, he had her in his crosshairs. But instead of taking the shot immediately, he activated a specialized communication device, a tactical radio preset to the frequency Chen had used during their time training together. "Lisa, This is Daniel Cross. I have you in my scope. Don't move. The figure in his optics froze momentarily, then slowly raised one hand in acknowledgement. Daniel, is that really you? Her voice carried surprise but not fear. It's me. Why are you doing this, Lisa? Why are you killing Americans? A long pause. Because those Americans are killing truth. Archon Initiative isn't what you think it is. It's not protecting America. It's subverting it. So you turned traitor, I turned against traitors. There's a difference. Chen's voice carried conviction. They told us we died, Daniel. Faked our deaths. Recruited us into Archon. Used us to eliminate threats to their power structure. We were assassins for a shadow government operating inside the military. Daniel processed this claim, and now we're finishing what we should have done from the beginning. Exposing them, eliminating the real traitors by killing Pentagon officials. That's terrorism, Lisa. That's justice. Those officials in that convoy, they're Archon leadership. They're the ones who sent us to murder American civilians, who discovered their operations. They're the ones who betrayed everything we swore to protect. The claim resonated with Daniel's own growing suspicions. The patterns he'd observed, the targets being eliminated, the way Webb seemed to withhold information. It all suggested something more complex than simple treason. If what you're saying is true, there are proper channels, oversight, congressional committees, inspectors general. Chen's laugh was bitter. We tried that. The whistleblowers ended up dead. Convenient accidents. Training mishaps. We were supposed to be next until we went underground. Now we're using the skills they taught us against them. Daniel's finger rested on the trigger. Decades of training warring with the possibility that he was on the wrong side of this fight. I can't let you take that shot, Lisa. Those officials will be surrounded by security. Regular soldiers just doing their job. Your shot will trigger a response that gets innocent people killed. Innocent? Daniel, wake up. There are no innocent people in that convoy. They're all part of it. Prove it. Give me evidence. I can verify. Another pause. Lower your rifle, Daniel. Meet me in the open. I'll show you everything. Every tactical instinct screamed that this was a trap. Meeting an enemy combatant in the open violated every protocol, risked his life unnecessarily, and could be exactly what Chen wanted to eliminate a counter-sniper who had killed one of her team members. But Daniel found himself lowering his weapon and standing slowly, hands visible. I'm walking to the clearing 200 meters east of your position. Come alone or don't come. He moved deliberately through the terrain, hyper-aware that Chen could end him with a single shot if she chose. But as he reached the clearing, she emerged from the opposite tree line, rifle slung across her back, hands also visible. They stood facing each other, across 30 meters of open ground. Two American soldiers, who should have been on the same side, now confronting each other in a Syrian wasteland. Show me, Daniel said simply. Chen reached slowly into her tactical vest and withdrew a small encrypted drive. Everything's here. Archon's organizational structure, missions we conducted, personnel files on operatives and targets. You'll find operations against American citizens on U.S. soil, Daniel. Journalists, investigators, politicians who asked inconvenient questions, all eliminated by snipers like us who thought they were fighting terrorists. She tossed the drive toward him. It landed in the dirt between them. One more thing, she continued. Your name's on the list. You're being positioned as the next scapegoat. They'll use you to eliminate us, then eliminate you to cover their tracks, just like they did with everyone else who got too close. Daniel picked up the drive carefully, never taking his eyes off Chen. Why not just kill me now? I've eliminated Reeves. I'm hunting your entire team, because you're still one of us, because you deserve to know the truth before you decide which side you're really on, and because, she hesitated, because I'm tired of killing people who should be allies. Before Daniel could respond, Chen's expression changed. She looked past him, eyes widening. Daniel, run. He dove instinctively, as a rifle shot cracked across the clearing. The round hit where he'd been standing, spraying dirt and rock fragments. Daniel rolled to cover, weapon coming up, scanning for the shooter. Chen had moved with equal speed, now behind a boulder, calling out, "Sniper, Northwest Ridge." "That's not my team." A second shot, hit near Chen's position. Daniel spotted the muzzle flash through his scope. A shooter at approximately 600 meters. Professional positioning. Suppressed weapon. They're not shooting at me, Chen realized. They're shooting at both of us. Daniel understood immediately. Archon couldn't allow Chen to share her evidence, and they couldn't risk Daniel learning the truth. The solution was to eliminate both of them. Claim Chen had killed him before being killed herself in the firefight. We need to move together or we both die, Daniel said, tactical necessity overriding everything else. Agreed. On my signal, bound 50 meters south toward that wadi, I'll provide covering fire. They moved like the professionals they were. Chen laying down suppressive fire while Daniel sprinted to the next cover position, then reversing roles. The hostile sniper tried to track them, but couldn't establish a clear shot as they used terrain and coordinated movement to break contact. 10 minutes later, they had put enough distance between themselves and the shooter to temporarily halt. That was Archon's cleanup team, Chen said, breathing heavily. They can't let either of us survive this. Daniel looked at the drive in his hand. I need to verify what's on here. You will, but first, we need to survive long enough to get it to people who can do something with it. They were both silent, processing the implications. Daniel had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He just cooperated with an enemy combatant against his own command structure. If Chen was lying, if this was an elaborate manipulation, he just committed treason. But if she was telling the truth, everything he'd believed about his mission was a lie. Make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to reveal truths that will change how you see military operations forever. Comment your thoughts below, and let's continue. Daniel and Chen moved through the Syrian countryside with the practiced efficiency of operators who understood that survival depended on maintaining discipline despite impossible circumstances. They traveled separately, but parallel, maintaining visual contact, while ensuring one shooter couldn't eliminate both simultaneously. Where are we going? Daniel asked during one brief consolidation. Safe house, 15 kilometers south, former intelligence asset before Archon shut down. Legitimate operations in this sector. If it's still secure, we can access communications equipment to contact people outside the compromised chain of command. And if it's not secure, then we improvise, like we've been doing since this started. The journey took 6 hours of careful movement through terrain occupied by multiple hostile forces. ISIS remnants, Assad regime elements, Russian patrols, and now apparently their own military. By the time they reached the coordinates Chen had provided, darkness had fallen completely. The safe house was a nondescript structure in a half-destroyed village, indistinguishable from dozens of other war-damaged buildings. Chen approached first, checking for surveillance or signs of compromise before signaling Daniel forward. Inside, covered in dust and debris, sat sophisticated communication equipment and a ruggedized computer system still connected to secure satellite uplinks. Still powered, Chen confirmed, activating the systems. Solar panels on the roof, buried power cells. This facility was designed to survive complete isolation. She connected the encrypted drive to the computer, establishing multiple authentication protocols before accessing its contents. What Daniel saw over the next hour destroyed his remaining faith in the mission he'd been conducting. Archon Initiative had been established 23 years earlier as a covert program to eliminate threats to American national security that existed outside legal frameworks. The premise was sound. Sometimes enemies operated beyond the reach of laws, and extraordinary measures were necessary. But over 2 decades, Archon had evolved into something else entirely. The program became self-sustaining, self-justifying, eliminating not just foreign threats, but domestic ones. Journalists investigating military corruption, congressional staffers asking uncomfortable questions, intelligence analysts who discovered evidence of illegal operations. The files contained mission logs, detailing 67 domestic eliminations over 15 years, each one carefully staged as an accident, suicide, or random violence, each one removing someone who threatened to expose Archon's existence or operations. Daniel recognized names in those files, people whose deaths he'd read about in news reports, never suspecting they'd been murdered by American military snipers. Operating on U.S. soil, we conducted 12 of these missions before realizing what we were actually doing. Chen said quietly. They told us these were foreign assets on American soil, terrorists who'd evaded normal law enforcement. By the time we understood the truth, we were too deep. Either we continued, or we joined the list of targets. So you faked your deaths. We had help. An Archon administrator who developed a conscience. He created the false casualty reports, arranged for us to go underground, provided resources to survive while we gathered evidence. Then they killed him too, made it look like a heart attack. Daniel studied the personnel files, dozens of military and intelligence officials involved in Archon operations. Some names he recognized: senior officers, Pentagon leadership, even Congressional Oversight Committee members. Why go after them now? Why not just release this evidence? Chen pulled up another file. Because we tried. We sent this to every oversight body, every inspector general, every media outlet we could identify. Either the information was buried, or the recipients ended up dead. Archon's reach extends into institutions that should provide accountability. So elimination is your only option? We're not trying to kill everyone involved, just the leadership, the dozen people who actually direct Archon operations. Remove them, create enough chaos that the evidence can't be suppressed, and maybe the system cleanses itself. Daniel understood the logic even as he recognized its flaws. Or you just create power vacuums that get filled by the next generation of corruption. Maybe, but at least we'll have tried something more than complaining through proper channels that are systematically compromised. A proximity alert sounded. Chen checked the security monitors, showing multiple vehicles approaching the village from 2 directions. They found us, probably tracking your equipment. Daniel immediately checked his gear. His radio and GPS unit both showed encrypted secure channels, but Archon obviously had access to those encryption keys. How long do we have? 5 minutes, maybe less. The vehicles are moving fast. Chen began rapidly downloading files from the computer to multiple portable drives, creating redundant copies of the evidence. We split up, Daniel decided. Each take different routes. Harder to track 2 targets, moving independently. Agreed. But first, Chen handed him 2 of the drives. Insurance. If one of us doesn't make it, the other can still complete the mission. Daniel secured the drives in a waterproof pouch. The weight felt simultaneously insignificant and crushing. Mere ounces of storage, containing evidence that could bring down decades of systematic corruption. Where do we meet? Chen pulled up a map. There's a UN observation post 40 kilometers west. They rotate personnel every 2 weeks, meaning some staff might be outside Archon's immediate control. We get there separately, present the evidence to international oversight bodies who have less incentive to bury it. That's a long way to travel through hostile territory. You have a better option. Daniel didn't. See you at the UN post. Try not to shoot any more Americans on the way. Chen smiled grimly. Right back at you. They departed through separate exits as the approaching vehicles entered the village. Daniel moved south initially, then circled west, using his training to evade the search pattern he knew would develop. Once the assault team found the safe house empty, through his night vision equipment, he watched the building he'd just evacuated being systematically cleared by what appeared to be American Special Operations personnel. They moved with the professional efficiency he'd expect, which somehow made it worse. These weren't enemy combatants he could hate. They were his fellow soldiers, following orders they probably believed were legitimate. Daniel spent the next 18 hours moving through territory occupied by multiple hostile forces, avoiding contact, surviving through the skills that had made him one of the military's most effective scout snipers. He witnessed Assad regime patrols, ISIS remnant fighters, Russian military advisors, and twice more American special operations teams, clearly searching for specific targets. 40 kilometers became a marathon of tactical movement, requiring every technique he'd learned across 8 years of combat operations. He went hungry, rationed his water carefully, and pushed his body through exhaustion toward a destination that represented his only remaining option. The UN observation post appeared exactly as described. A small compound flying blue flags, staffed by international personnel conducting monitoring operations. Daniel approached during daylight, hands visible, making no threatening movements. The guards were Norwegian, professional but cautious. "I need to speak with your commanding officer," Daniel announced. "I have evidence of war crimes involving American military personnel." What followed was 6 hours of careful negotiation, verification, and presentation of evidence to UN officials who were simultaneously intrigued and terrified by what Daniel was sharing. War crimes allegations against a superpower required extraordinary proof, and Daniel was providing exactly that. Chen arrived 4 hours after Daniel, having taken a different route but encountering similar obstacles. Together, they presented coordinated testimony, supporting each other's claims with documentary evidence that made denial impossible. The UN legal officer, a Swedish woman named Kristina Andersson, reviewed the files with professional precision. "This is extensive, if authenticated. This represents systematic violations of international law, domestic law, and military justice. The implications are enormous, which is why it's been buried for 2 decades, Chen replied. "Every normal channel has been compromised," Anderson considered carefully. "We'll need to handle this through multiple simultaneous channels. International Court, U.S. Justice Department, Congressional Oversight, international media. Release everything at once, so suppression becomes impossible." Over the next week, while Daniel and Chen remained under UN protection, the evidence was verified, authenticated, and prepared for coordinated release. The process revealed the sophistication of Archon's operations. They had compartmentalized so effectively that even personnel within the program often didn't understand its full scope. The release, when it came, triggered the exact chaos Chen had predicted. 67 documented assassinations on American soil, Pentagon leadership implicated in systematic elimination of oversight, congressional committees discovered to be infiltrated, intelligence agencies compromised. The public response was explosive. Calls for investigation, prosecution, and systemic reform dominated every news cycle. The military and intelligence communities went into defensive modes, promising accountability while working to contain the damage. Daniel watched these developments from UN protection, knowing his military career was over regardless of outcome. He'd defied orders, cooperated with hostile combatants, and exposed classified operations. Legally, he might be protected as a whistleblower. Practically, he'd made enemies at the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. 2 months after the initial release, as investigations were beginning to produce indictments, Kristina Andersson approached Daniel with unexpected news. "The UN has received a formal request from the U.S. Justice Department for your return to face charges related to unauthorized disclosure of classified information." Daniel had been expecting this, and were denying the request. "Based on the evidence, you qualify for protected whistleblower status under international law. Additionally, several nations have offered asylum if you choose to decline returning to U.S. jurisdiction." The offer represented safety, but permanent exile. Daniel considered his options carefully. What about the others? Chen and the remaining members of her team? Similar situations. They've been offered protection while investigations proceed. Daniel thought about his family back home, his friends still serving, the life he'd built over 8 years of military service. All of it would end if he accepted asylum. But he also thought about the 67 people murdered by Archon operations. The journalists, investigators, and concerned citizens who'd been eliminated for asking uncomfortable questions. The system of accountability they'd been trying to protect. I'll stay, he decided finally, under UN protection, until investigations conclude and proper oversight is restored. Chen made the same decision. Despite everything, despite their team being hunted and eliminated, they chose to trust that the system could eventually be fixed. Here's what I learned from Daniel Cross's impossible choice. Real courage isn't found in following orders without question or in blindly trusting the chain of command. It's found in the willingness to question orders when they contradict the principles you swore to uphold, in recognizing that sometimes the enemy wears the same uniform you do, and the traitor occupies the position that should command respect. They train you to follow orders, to trust your leaders, to believe that the institution knows best. They forget that institutions are run by people, and people can be corrupted by power, ambition, and the belief that the ends justify any means. Daniel's finger hesitated on that trigger because he understood something most people never grasp. That pulling a trigger against your own people should never become routine, should never become just another tactical decision. That moment of hesitation wasn't weakness. It was the last defense against becoming the very thing you're supposed to fight. The hardest shot isn't the one at extreme range through difficult conditions. It's the one where you have to choose between the mission you were given and the principles you swore to uphold, between following orders and following your conscience, between being a good soldier and being a good person. Daniel chose conscience over orders, truth over convenience, principles over career. It cost him everything he'd built over 8 years of service, but it gave him something more valuable: the ability to look at himself in the mirror without shame. If this story changed how you think about duty and obedience, show it by hitting that subscribe button. Share it with someone in uniform, or anyone facing their own impossible choice between what they're told and what they know is right. Drop a comment about what you would do in Daniel's position, because we're all operators in our own lives. The question isn't whether we'll face moments that test our principles. It's whether we'll have the courage to defend those principles when the cost is everything we've worked for. That's the real mission they don't prepare you for. The one where you have to aim your precision at the system itself, to eliminate the threat that exists behind the rank and orders and classified authorities, to be the operator who says no when everyone else is saying yes, sir. Daniel Cross disappeared into that protected status, working with international oversight to ensure the evidence he'd risked everything to expose actually produced change, not because he wanted recognition or revenge, but because someone had to stand watch over the watchers, to question the orders that came from the top, to remember that duty to country means duty to truth even when truth is dangerous. That's the real special operation: choosing conscience over comfort, principle over position, honor over everything. Mission first, but only when the mission is worthy of the sacrifice.